This is what we're making, a step bezel to hold the shell so that we can see both sides of the shell and have a nice tidy little shelf to sit it on. This is the end profile of a step bezel. This is a commercial piece. It's got decorations on the bottom. And today, the reason that we're using a step bezel, we're making a step bezel, is we want to set a shell, and we want to be able to see both the front and the back of the shell. And by using the step bezel, it just eliminates soldering this to a base and then piercing out the base so that you can see the back. Now, we're going to make our own step bezel. I just said this is commercial. You can buy commercial step bezel if you can't be bothered. If you don't have any and you want to make some, it's easy enough, but you do need square wire. And you don't want your bezel to be thicker than 0.3 mil. So this is fine silver. It's 3 millimeters high, 0.3 thick, and this is 0.8 square wire, and the reason I have the 0.8 square wire is I use this for setting my pearls on. But it makes a very nice ledge for the bottom of a step bezel. So anneal this. I mean, you may say, well, it's soft. Well, yes, it is. But if you anneal it, it'll be even softer. Run your flame on this for about 5 seconds, and then you'll be able to just pull it with your fingers and get it straight. And the reason we want both of these straight is so that when we sit the one on top of the other, it'll be nice, flat, straight, and it'll be easy to solder. So I've just put both of these on the charcoal block, and I would suggest that you do one at a time. That way you don't overheat or underheat something. Now with this, 2, 3, 4, that's 5 seconds on the fine silver. I'll just put that on my bench plate. Now this square wire is sterling, so you actually need to bring it up to a dull red, like any sterling. I'm just brushing end to end. So that's that. Now quench this and it'll be nice and soft. Easy to work. Now with your square wire, you can just run it into your parallel jaw pliers. Give it a few squeezes along the length, turn it 90 degrees, do it again. And if it had a slight upward curve, it would be nice, because that way we can just put it on the charcoal block, rest a third hand on either end, and it'll have a little bit of tension. Now with the fine silver, it's so soft that if you just pull or run it through your fingers, you'll be able to get it nice and straight and flat. So check it for flat against your bench plate. Yep. And now I'm going to just put the square wire on top of the flat wire, making sure it's flush with the bottom. I'll hold it into place with my third hands, one on either end. I'll flux the length, and then I'll put a few pieces of hard solder on the top edge where the square and the flat wire meet, and we'll solder the two together. So I have the two bottom edges lined up, and these are just resting on top. I'm not holding it. I'm just using a little bit of pressure. Stir up your flux. We don't want a huge amount on, and just run a line along where the two touch. I'm not worried about the ends at the moment. And hard solder. Place it with your flux brush. Be fairly generous because we don't want gaps in this. Because once a stone is set, you'll be able to see the bottom. So I'll zoom in so you can see where I'm placing these. So there's one there, one there, one there. So continue to the end. So I have a 2 mil long piece of solder about every 8 millimeters along the length of this. So a nice neutral flame. Dry out your flux so that your solder chips don't jump around. So I'm about 150 mil away at the moment. So now I'm just going to start at this end, brushing the flame back and forth. Keep your solder pick in your hand so that if your square wire starts to increase in length, you can hold it in position. So there it goes. Very nice. A little bit off on this end, but that's not soldered yet, so I can push that around. And we don't need to hold this anymore. So we can quench it, push the ends around a little bit to get them where we want, put a little piece of solder on either end, finish your soldering. So you can see this end is kind of up in the air. It doesn't really matter. Everything else is soldered except for the very ends. So there's that. Go to the other end. And there's that. So now quench it and we can form it around our shell. So have a look at your step bezel. Make sure that you don't have any unmelted pieces of solder, because if you do, they'll come back to bite you later. As an example, setting your stone, you chip the edge. So now wrap your bezel around whatever it is you're setting. Get a really good fit on the end and solder it like you would a regular bezel, making sure that you're sitting on the step, not just against the step. So just wrap it. Mark where it crosses over, and this one I would saw because it's thick enough on the bottom. If you cut it with side cutters, it's going to distort it. So that's just a quick glance at what the bottom's going to look like when we're finished, and the top. So form your bezel. You can just use your fingers, it's soft enough to do. And I've got one piece of hard solder, a neutral flame, joint up, and we're going to put the solder on the outside. So I just pick it up with my solder pick. And make sure that your flame only goes at this spot. Don't go down and heat the opposite side. So there it is, soldered. Quench it, pickle it, and then push it around your shell. So the shell is sitting in the bezel. That's the base. Nice and clean line, shell open on the back. Now this is ready to push over, but you need to solder your jump ring on, or your bail, or whatever else you're going to use. And you can, at this point, tidy up your solder join. So solder your jump ring on, tidy that up. I would probably polish this in the tumbler and then set the shell, because if you try to polish this with the shell in, you're going to get triply on the shell, which you can clean off, but why bother if you don't have to? So that's it, really, our little step bezel. Now, another reason for making a step bezel is if you're using gold bezel and you're soldering to silver, you would show a line of silver at the base. And it's really fiddly to cut the metal so that it sits inside the bezel so that you have a proper smooth gold bezel on the outside. So if you use the square wire as a step bezel, it just eliminates all of that bother. And that's it. Nice and simple.